It's so good to see all of you. I know this is a busy time of year. I've watched you, and it's just great to not have kids in school. Really is wonderful. I'm watching y'all get school supplies and school clothes and getting ready for this new routine. And, I see most of the kids absolutely hate it. Most of the adults absolutely love it. But some of you adults, I've noticed, even as an adult, you don't like routine. You don't like schedule, and it wears you out. Now, me, man, I'm a routine person. I'm a schedule person. And all we've been doing this summer with the church buildings and remodeling and construction, man, I've just been having many panic attacks, just constant. The first thing that changed for me was my Sunday schedule. And I didn't realize how in tune my Sunday schedule was. I get up early. I drive over to Waxahachie. It takes about 20, 25 minutes. I preach my sermon in the truck on the way over. And now it takes me about 3 minutes to get here. And so the sermons have gotten much shorter. No, I'm kidding. And so it's just changed my entire schedule to do it. And I didn't know how much it was going to bother me until I actually got involved in it. And then watching all the remodeling. And by the way, the artists that came in and painted all of our facilities in the children's areas of both campus, didn't they do a great job? If you haven't seen that, I can't wait until the end of September when you see it completely finished, but it's been incredible. But then I guess the hardest transition has been shutting down that main room in Waxahachie. That's been tough. And I know many of you have felt that with me. Some of you are over 100 in each service are on a front porch. It's 103 degrees out there, but you're coming every week. Some of you are in the venue, and some of you are online, and you've been online all summer. And I'm glad that we have that experience, but I want to encourage you, you got to get back to the campuses. Waxahachie campus is doing a great job keeping momentum, keeping excitement. It's still a great place to be on Sunday morning. This campus has done incredible. You're running over 1,000 every week. It's exciting to be here. It's fun to watch. It's just incredible. And I've enjoyed all of that part. But once again, any chaos, any change is uncomfortable. And it seems like in our society today, everything is chaos. Everything's competing for our time. Everything's competing for our dollar. Prices are going up. There are just wars going on all around us. There's just bad news everywhere we look. We have a 24-hour news cycle. Now, the great thing for the generations before us, they didn't know everything that was going on. If something happened in Europe, it took a week to get over here. And then if you didn't read the paper, you didn't know about it. And I think because we know so much about what's going on in the world and all the politics and all the maneuvering, because we know about the Ukraine and Russian war and the war in Israel and all of these things, I think too many times it just keeps us in a state of anxiety. The stock market, we know when it goes up, when it goes down, and it just always focuses us on the things that are negative, and there's so much information flooding us over and over and over. I think for me personally, one of the things that helps me with those panic attacks is stopping and realizing what's most important. It's taking a deep breath and knowing that in all the wars and rumors of wars, God told us it was going to be like that, and he's still on his throne. When I look at the political upheaval and the tribes that we put ourselves in and the anger and the animosity toward one another, I know that God already knows who's going to sit as the president of the United States. I think for us in all of these circumstances of chaos, it's good for us to focus on the fundamentals, to strip everything else away and to try to focus on what's most important. As a church, I thought this series would do well for us. I know it does well for me to strip everything away and get back into what's most important, the fundamentals. As a believer, as a follower, what is the most important thing for us to know about following Christ? I mean, we live in a time that you can listen to the greatest preachers of our generation. You can read the books that I used to have to drive to Fort Worth and go to the library. You can read those online. You can grow as a Christian in remarkable ways. But I think even in that, sometimes there's too much information. I mean, look at the Christian religion. Look at Christianity. I mean, it's confusing, isn't it? Think about it for a minute. How many different churches do we have here in Ellis County? How many different denominations do we have in Ellis County? You got the Catholics, right? And they run in us. They're here, boy. It's everywhere. You got the Baptists, and they run Waxahachie. They're there everywhere. And then you got the Methodists and the Church of Christ and the Assembly of God. Well, I guess Assembly of God really run Waxahachie with the college over there. So I'm just saying, everywhere you go, all of these variations of Christianity. And you know what they all have in common? They all think they're right. They all think they're right, and they think all the other ones are wrong. Am I not right? I mean, if you grew up in one of these traditions, I mean, weren't you taught that all these other denominations are wrong and we're the only one that has it right? But I wonder, when we look at all of that, how much of what we believe is fundamental? What do we have to believe? I know for me, at 16 years old, I started in the Southern Baptist tradition. I'd been Catholic before that. When I say Catholic, when my mama came to town, we went to Catholic church. That's all that meant. That's the only time I went. All I learned in the Catholic church is don't look back when they ring the bell. That's all I know. But then at 16, I moved behind a little Baptist church, Southern Baptist tradition, and I began going to that church and learning. And I mean, I have nothing but great things to say about how they treated me. They loved me. They took care of me. They paid for my college. They paid for my seminary. I appreciate all that they did. They had a great heart for missions. But I grew up in a time, and even in that Southern Baptist tradition, they imploded. They turned on themselves and started talking about, we got to believe this, and you got to believe this, and you got to believe this. And pretty soon, they had all of their beliefs stacked up, and I began to look and go, wait. What do I have to believe to be a follower of Christ? So that's what we want to talk about. I want to strip everything away and get down to what's fundamental. If you're going to be a follower of Christ, what's indispensable? What do you have to believe? What is necessary in our beliefs? What do we need to believe to know what is right? What is crucial? What is central? What's required? And just as important, what can we let go of? I mean, are there traditions that we can let go of? Are there doctrines that we can let go of? Are there beliefs that we don't have to hold on to be a fully devoted follower of Christ? How much of what we believe is cultural? How much of what we believe is comfortable or even fashionable? For many of us, our beliefs are traditional. It's the way we were raised. But then when we look at those beliefs, how many of those beliefs are harmful? I think there's some harmful beliefs out there. Now, this is not new. Every generation creates this new belief, this novel approach, this cruel approach, this toxic approach, a divisive approach. There's so many generations, and you can look back at our history as the church, and we don't do well. I mean, we're the church of the, Crusades. We're churches, the Southern Baptist Church. Do you know why the Southern Baptist Church started? Because the Northern Baptists wouldn't appoint slave owners. And that's where Southern Baptists came from. That's divisive. And so we look at all of these things, and it's not new that we have these traditions and these cultural things, and we use the Bible to divide, and we use the Bible for hate. We use the Bible to separate us, and it becomes part of our dogma, part of our doctrine, even part of our theology. And they believe, as you get to this point, that if you don't believe this, you're not a true follower. It happened to me in Baptist life. Early in my study, I realized that women were equal in God's eyes to men. And that was something Southern Baptists did not believe, let me tell you. And they still don't believe it today. In fact, churches are getting kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention for ordaining women, in which we have done. And so I saw that early on, and it got to the point that if you didn't sign a document in the Southern Baptist Convention saying that, then you couldn't be. And everybody does that. Every denomination does that. They take whatever they believe, and if you don't believe it, you're not a believer. And I thought, well, when you stack that up against Jesus and the Gospels, now, they always have some kind of biblical content. Even slavery, they claimed, was biblical because Paul told slaves to obey their masters. That's not biblical. Slavery is not biblical in any way. When you look at Jesus in the New Testament, when you look at the gospel, Jesus would have always been opposed to slavery, wouldn't he? He'd always been opposed to the Inquisition. He'd always been opposed to crusades. He's always been opposed to us as followers dividing up and arguing about whether an infant is baptized or whether salvation is lost or whether you must be baptized to be saved. And all of these peripheral things that we argue about, Jesus would have never argued about. A lot of times when we take these ideas and these approaches and what we've turned into doctrine and we put them up against Jesus, it's very un-Christ-like. In fact, it's almost anti-Jesus. And so what happens in some of your faith and some of your life is you start growing up and you start thinking about these things, and pretty soon you're disillusioned with church. You're disillusioned with religion because you're caught up in the tradition and the tribes, and you're caught up in the things that are familiar, the things that are comfortable, the things that your parents taught you, and they don't stack up to what you think about Jesus. And what happens to many of you is you just throw Jesus out with the bathwater. You heard that expression? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what many of us have done. We've looked at the things in the church and the traditions and the cultures and the things that we've done to one another, and we've gone, you know what? I can't believe any of that. And so you deconstruct your faith and you throw Jesus out. I understand that. I understand that. The problem is, for many of us, we haven't allowed our faith to grow up. And faith has to grow up. Our faith can't be the same as it was when we were children. You know, most of you learn about Jesus the same time you learn about Santa Claus. And your idea of Santa Claus changes as you grow up. But your idea of Jesus doesn't. And you're in a church many times that don't want you to ask questions. You don't ask questions. Listen, a religion that can't be questioned is not trustworthy. And the church hasn't provided a lot of space for you to ask questions. And there's questions that we need to ask, right? Why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad people prosper? Why do evil people become rich and seem to have all these things while you're a follower and you're poor as dirt? Why didn't God come through when I prayed that prayer? You know, my faith says that if I have faith, I pray and mountains can be moved. All I ask is for my dad to be cured from cancer. God didn't answer. See, our faith, we've been taught that David and Goliath, we're David. And when we sling that stone, our giant's going to fall. But in reality, Goliath kicked our butt. And Goliath keeps on winning. And every time we go up against Goliath, he puts his thumb on us and he squashes us and smashes us into the ground. Where is my miracle, God? When I look at my life and I look at the Word of God and I see that you parted the Red Sea and I see this miracle and I see the blind can see and I see the lame can walk and I see even dead can come back to life, but all I prayed is for marriage to be saved. And it didn't happen. That's why our faith has to grow up. We have to see Jesus the way Jesus paints himself. So what must one believe to be a true follower of Christ? What must we believe? Well, Jesus said this, and this is what we stack up all of our traditions, all of our rituals, all of our denominations up against. Love God and love others. Now, what do you say about loving others? Wish he hadn't said it. Because you just tell me to love others, I can love others. Kind of. But he said, love others the way I've loved you. That's not good. Jesus, you've loved me, and I've been a messed up, broken. I have just betrayed you at every turn. I have mocked your name with my life. God, and you still love me? And so now you want me to love others that way when they hurt me, when they deceive me, when they betray me? I have to keep loving them? In fact, you go further and you tell me to love my enemies? That doesn't make good sense. Love my enemies? Are you kidding me? They're trying to kill me. But that's how he said to love. And so as our faith grows up, we look at these traditions, we look at these things, and some of you have walked out of church because you just didn't believe what the church was telling you. You didn't believe because your life didn't measure up. Or the church told you some things and you just can't wrap your mind around that happening. And you have an uncle that the church tells you he's going to hell, but he can't be going to hell. And so you walk away from the church. Some of you walk away from faith, but many of you didn't walk away from faith. And this is the problem. You've seen something in the church that's unhealthy. You've seen something in the church that's harmful. And you've walked away from the church, but you've left something valuable and important. There's a man that I've spoken to on several occasions. He said, I will never go to church another day in my life. He said, I still believe in Jesus, but I won't go to church. And I dug into the story and I said, what happened to you? What happened? He said, when I was a young boy, my dad beat my mother. And I watched it. And my mother went to the preacher for help. And the preacher said, go home and submit to your husband, and he'll stop beating you. He never stopped beating her. I watched my mother get beat up by my father my entire life. She was told to stay in that relationship. That's unhealthy. That's hurtful. But in the process, he threw the baby out with the bathwater because there's something valuable in your relationship with Jesus. So what do? How do we strip away all of those things and get down to who Jesus is? I've already told you a little bit about my faith and how I had to question it through the years. I had to strip so much away. You would not recognize me 30 years ago. You wouldn't recognize me. Man, I would argue theological things for hobbies. I'd tell you how you were wrong. I knew I was right. I was super Pharisaical, super pious. I knew I was right and you were wrong. And I had my guidelines, and I mean, if you broke them, you were in trouble. There are youth at Tabernacle that got in trouble for playing poker with Cheetos. Because, man, you don't play poker. I was strict. I was so strict in my beliefs. It was unbelievable. The one that shook me up the most was I was challenged about drinking alcohol. And I grew up in that tradition in Southern Baptist life that if you drank alcohol, you did not know Jesus and you're going straight to hell. You could not drink alcohol. I believe that with all of my heart, and I'd argue with you all day long. And I'd come into your house, you'd have to hide the wine and the beer. Not because I'm going to drink it. Now you have to hide it because I might drink it. But then you had to hide it because I questioned your faith. And I was challenged in that. Now, I remember stripping down the culture that I had come to, the tradition that I'd understood. And now I want to be clear. For some of you, alcohol is the worst thing in the world, and you should never touch it. Alcohol has caused more problems in our world probably than anything. And so as I studied that word, I wanted to believe it. I knew I was right. I wanted to prove that I was right. And I came to the conclusion, I'm not right. That was difficult. That weekend, I went to Embassy Suites, and I took my first taste of alcohol at 32 years old. Probably one of the best things that happened to me. I still don't like it. But you know what it did? It began a process of me deconstructing and getting down to what was basic about my faith. And I didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I came to one passage and one thing that's instrumental to all of you if you want to follow Jesus. Who is Jesus? Fundamental question. Who is Jesus? Was he a good man? Was he a prophet? Who was Jesus? So let's strip it down. Let's go back. Let's go back to 30 AD. Jesus has been teaching for about 2.5 years. The crowds have come, and man, he has blown them away. He has fed them. He's walked on water. He's healed people. He's brought a dead person back to life. He's done all kinds of miracles. And they listen to him, and he teaches in a way that they'd never heard before. And he talks about how the weak and how the broken and how the hurting are part of the family of God. And people are grabbing onto it, but he's also very confusing. So confusing. He says things that they don't understand. and they're left questioning. He goes to a place called Caesarea Philippi, which is about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. He goes up there. Caesarea Philippi is a town named after Herod's son, Philip. And then Philip, when he came in power, named it after the Caesar, all political games. So it had two names, Caesarea Philippi. And he's sitting at Caesarea Philippi, and he looks at his followers. And this is what he says. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Jesus used the title Son of Man. Where's that come from? The book of Daniel in the Old Testament is where that title comes from. And Jesus took that title as his own. Whenever you see Jesus refer to himself, he refers to himself as the Son of Man. That title literally means the one who God gives the authority to govern the nations. So if you ever doubt that Jesus knew who he was, he knew who he was. I've heard people say, well, Jesus never claimed. Yes, he did. He claimed to be the Son of Man, which was the one that was going to give all authority over all the nations. So he asked them, and they replied, some say John the Baptist. Some say Elijah. Some say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then Jesus looks at them and asks this question. Who do you say that I am? When we talk about fundamentals of the faith, this is it. Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter speaks and says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Now, there's so much to that answer that I want to unpack for you. You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Messiah, you're the anointed one. You're the one to come. You're the one that will reign forever and ever. You're the final king. All through the Old Testament, we hear the line of David. And David is given a promise that your son will rule the kingdom forever and ever, and the reign of his kingdom will have no end. And he is saying, Jesus, you are the final king. You're the king of all things. You will be king forevermore. There will be no end to your kingdom. You are the Son of God. Now let that resonate for just a minute in your mind. You're the final king. What does that mean? See, you and I, we don't understand this king thing. But when you grew up in a culture and a generation that had a king that had ultimate authority, what the king said went, whatever he said you did, or you gave your life. Peter's saying, you're the king. Now, if we can grasp that, it should change everything about us because he is our king. That means I no longer have authority over my own life. I no longer have say over what I do and what I don't do. Now I am submitted to the one true king. That's fundamental in our faith. You can know about God. You can know about Jesus. You can believe that Jesus walked, but until you submit to say, you are my king. What does Jesus do when Peter says that? The next verse, he goes, oh, hey, Peter, tone it down a little. Come on, man. Nope. He says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this has not been revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. Jesus doesn't back up from this. He says, you are right. I am the final king. I am the authority over your life. You submit to me, and you live forever. Now, what's important for you to know, and last week we talked about what kind of church the Avenue is. We're a come and see church because we believe Jesus told people to come and see. And he called his first disciples and he said, come and see. And crowds came and they loved Jesus. They loved Jesus. They wanted to be around Jesus. Listen, people that don't know, people outside should love this church if we look like Jesus. People not anything like Jesus, like Jesus. He said, come and see, come and see. And then he taught and he did miracles and he did incredible things. But right before this passage, he looked at that crowd. And because he was going to be the final king, he looked at them and said, now, come and die. come and die. He said it like this, really creepy. He said, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no part of my kingdom. He says from that day, many left. I might have left too. That's weird sounding. But on this side, we understand that his body was going to be broken for us on that cross, and that his blood was going to be poured out to be a new covenant in Jesus, that he became our king, and we became part of that family of God, and our sins were forgiven, and we get to live eternally in a home prepared for us by Jesus. But you can't do it by just coming and seeing. We have to come and die. So this is a point for some of you in this room today. We talk about taking your next step. For many of you listening in Waxahachie, online and in this room, hear me quickly, because God is speaking to some of you. Some of you have thrown out the baby with the bathwater because the church has given you a wrong opinion of who Jesus is. You've got caught in tradition and culture. You've got caught in the peripheral. But today I want to draw you to what's fundamental. Who is Jesus? He is the final king and God's only son. And if you're ready to submit to that, he says, come and die. I want to lead you in that prayer. If you just simply say, Father, I believe that I'm a sinner. I believe that I've fallen short. I've tried religion. I've tried church. But God, I've never truly understood what's fundamental to believe that you are my king. You are my authority. And I submit to you today. And in that, I know my sins are forgiven. And I become part of your family. If you prayed that prayer today, Jesus enters our hearts and our lives. We begin to submit to him. And it's an incredible ride. We call it living a better life, not because we're better, but because Jesus is better through us. Today, you've tapped into the power of eternity. And this is a great time to do it, because next week, we have something we call Life Day. We call it Life Day because people are symbolizing they've come into a new life. And if you've ever seen baptism, people go under the water. That's the come and die. They're saying, I have died to my old ways. I've died to my old self. And I'm being resurrected like Jesus was resurrected. And from this day forward, I'm going to live as Jesus is my ultimate king. That happened today for some of you. It needs to happen for many of you. And then you show that faithfulness by next week. You go and sign up. You can go to the hub. You can get online. But next week, you need to be part of Life Day. Don't let anything talk you out of it. Some of you are like, well, I got baptized as a baby. It's a great tradition. It just pissed you off. It was not your idea. You were not submitting to Jesus as your king. I can promise you that. But it was great for your family. And some of you Baptists, you came down in Sunday school, and the preacher said, do you want to take the narrow road to heaven, or do you want to burn in hell for eternity? You're like, I think I'll take heaven. And you didn't submit. You just did what they told you to do. So today, maybe the first time that you've realized the fundamental of our faith. Who is Jesus? And if he's your king, come follow him. If you need to be baptized, next week's the day. We're going to have an incredible time. Come here, get here early, get up front, fill in, and we're going to have an incredible day. I'll see you next week.